Good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast. Good morning to those following on the West and the Pacific coasts. Those following from Israel and participating from Europe, we want to wish you a good evening. Today we have an incredible blessing. We have really one of the most thoughtful guests that we've ever had, and that is Dr. Lucian Tatsa-Laur. We refer to him Dr. Lucci, but Dr. Tatsa-Laur is the man who was the head of all of mental health for the IDF. And when this war came upon Israel, came upon the globe, out of the blue, a war that this kind of brutality Israel has never experienced in its history, a war this kind of length, the number of soldiers and number of reservists that have to spend, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of days in battle. This is something that is uncharted waters, unprecedented. And really the mind, the personality, the leader that laid out for the soldiers who are dealing with anxiety, who are dealing with depression, who are dealing with subacute PTSD, in many cases are dealing with acute PTSD, was Dr. Tatsa-Laur. He played that role. We at FIDF just felt incredibly blessed and honored to work with him, to partner with him. But today, having completed an incredible career in the IDF, where he's really left an incredible legacy in terms of mental health for soldiers. And I don't have to tell those watching from America, the challenges that we have here with our, not only the Vietnam veterans, not only the Korean veterans, but the Persian Gulf veterans, the challenges of PTSD in the United States, the challenges of substance abuse, of alcoholism, and all the multiple manifestations that happens as a function of combat, as a function of the worst of conditions, the most horrific of conditions that a soldier encounters on the battlefield. And Dr. Tatsa-Laur is here in Washington. The United States military, many other militaries are in contact with him. The research that he is doing on Israel, on other soldiers, hopefully it will be groundbreaking work, and we're very confident that it will be, and that it will change the whole world of treatment. It will change the future of how to deal with the trauma that in its impacts, how it destroys families, how it destroys individuals. And I've probably spoken way too long introducing him. The reality is he's a fascinating person, and we're just blessed to have him as our guest, and to give us insight into what has happened, what he's doing, and what we can learn from it. Dr. Tatsa-Laur, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for all the things that you said, and it's a pleasure working with the FIDF, and I will perhaps later on say a bit our collaboration and what we started together and you're continuing to do in the IDF. But maybe I will start with two anecdotes, if you will permit me, that will demonstrate how different this war was for us in the military. First of all, you have to imagine that during that period, I was in uniform, I was in active service, military service, and I was a colonel. And I was in charge of all the mental health of the IDF. And I will take you back to that dreadful Saturday morning in which sirens started. And we didn't really know what was happening at the beginning. It was all very, very chaotic. And one of the first phone calls I did was I picked up the phone and I rang my subordinate, which was in charge of all the Southern Command regarding mental health. Her name is Lior, and she's now a lieutenant colonel and in charge of all the mental health officers in the IDF. And I pick up the phone and I try to tell her, you know, we got to get going because something big is happening and we need to get going in terms of mental health. And I pick up the phone and then I hear her whispering and she's frightened and she tells me, I'm in the safe room together with my 3 children, and they are shooting outside. She lives in the envelope of Gaza, and my husband is outside fighting terrorists. That was the first moment. I think it was about 7:30 in the morning. You know that the attack started at about 6:30. And at 7:30, I understood that something else is happening here. You know, usually as mental health officers, we come into the battle in a later stage of the operation. We deploy soldiers, the soldiers get into battle, and then we see medical casualties. And only later on, like 2 or 3 weeks after the war, we start seeing people who have mental health problems. But the trauma in this instance was so very, very hard, and it penetrated all of our lives that it was totally different. And this was the first sign that something else is happening here. And now we are mental health officers. We are not the ones fighting. And my officer is needing to protect her children and fight for her life. Well, fortunately, she got out of there. It was a very long journey, a very scary one. And then, as the day unfolded, we started to understand that not only Lior experienced something different, but the whole of the IDF. You know, as a senior officer in the IDF, I've been to Gaza, I've been to Re'im quite a lot of times, and we were always under the impression that Hamas is not that big of an enemy, that when he attacks, we will be able to respond very swiftly and we will be able to contain him. And I think that something very terrible happened at that day, not only on the level of the persons themselves, but on the level of the IDF. We actually failed our mission. The IDF is called the Israel Defense Forces. Our mission is to defend the people of Israel, and we failed to do that. And not only we failed to do that, we were captured by surprise, and a lot of our commanders were killed, and some of them were taken hostages. And this feeling of being a failure as opposed to what happened before was a very dramatic start to this war. Now, this is very, very similar to what happens a lot of times in trauma. In trauma, you have like this continuity of living, and then something erupts and it severs your continuity. It severs your continuity of self and your continuity of reality. If I were the IDF before October 7th, I was almost invincible. I was a small and very strategic and very smart army, very capable, and as the day unfolded, I suddenly became a failure and I became incompetent. But then you need to remember that we still have a mission. You cannot just retract and dwell in your failure. You have to recuperate, you have to pick up yourself, and you have to start defending all the citizens that you failed. And this was a very, very important mission for us to do. And again, I had the privilege of being the one in charge of mental health, and I had the privilege that the commanders really wanted me to help. Because you could have imagined that commanders would say, I'm not dealing with mental health officers. They will weaken the forces. We don't deal with that. They need to be just men to pick up themselves and go forward. But something that was totally different in this war was how accepting and how the commanders really wanted us to come and help them. And I think this was a result of 2 myths that started to unfold during the first days of the war. And the first myth is that if you are struck by this kind of trauma, as I described it, then you are horribly disfigured, you will be ill, you won't be able to operate. And I think there was a real fear of the commanders and of the soldiers that they will not be able to pick themselves up and function as ideally as they could have done if this hadn't happened. The second myth was that if a mental health officer would come, he would like swish his wand like in Harry Potter, and it will make all the trauma disappear. And I think that both of the myths were totally wrong. And we saw this amazing resilience of the soldiers and of the commanders, and they used us to the best of their abilities to recuperate, to gain their bravery back, and to return to mission. And it didn't take a long time. If I'm talking about the feeling of failure that was in the first day, almost on the other side, on the second day, you could have felt like this conviction about what we are meant to do, and people started recuperating and enlisting their resilience. And what was amazing is that they used us, the mental health officers, in order to pick themselves up and continue their mission. And we have seen that the commanders really, really used these resources very, very smartly, and they did not use them in order, to go back into non-functioning state of mind or this sick state of mind. And I think we can see the amazing military achievements, at least, that the IDF had during the days after that. Unfortunately, you cannot undo history. Even if you manage to do a lot of good after that, you still remain traumatized. You still remain with that wound of being a failure, of not being that good. And I think that we still carry this sense of the failure with us. I have to say that one of the most difficult things for me as an Israeli to hear was another call that I made after I talked to Lior, to the mental health officer of the Gaza Brigade. And I told her she should start preparing to receive soldiers and to treat them. And she tells me, I cannot go because the Gaza Brigade is being occupied. Now, for an Israeli to hear the words, Ugdat Aza Nichbesha, the Gaza Brigade has been taken, it's like the end of the world. And why am I saying that? Because first of all, I think this was a very, very clear realization of the magnitude of the trauma that we suffered there. If I told you at the beginning the story of Lior, which is a very personal trauma, now we're talking about a national trauma. We're talking about a place in which we didn't think that we would be. We planned our wars to be on the side of the enemy in Gaza, in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Syria. We didn't plan for it to be on the side of Israel. And we didn't think that we would hear the words that an Israeli territory is being occupied by foreign people. Again, it took a few days and we released, of course, the Gaza Brigade. And this is the place, by the way, where we set up a shop for the acute stress disorder interventions. And I went there a day after the Gaza Brigade was released, and I wandered around. And as you wander around this kind of base, you suddenly see, by the way, a lot of FIDF buildings are over there, which were put by the FIDF, but you see like the gunshot wound holes and the destruction there, and you have like this eerie feeling and uncanny feeling that it's not real. And you say to yourself, I don't know, it's like a movie set. They couldn't have made like the gunshot holes more accurate. And you know that these are real gunshot wounds because you know what happened there 2 or 3 days before that. But you still have this feeling that you're living in a movie, that it is totally unreal reality. So that was for the beginning, and I just wanted to tell, my idea was to tell how different this war was. It opened with the trauma. The trauma made the mental health array very central in the beginning of the war, and I think that it continued to play an important role after that. Even though we're talking about the acute phase, and we know that most of the people that suffer acute phase symptoms will not be the ones that will need treatment later on. But as the war continued, of course, and the challenges grew bigger and bigger, and now we are about a year and a half, right, after the beginning of the war, a lot more people are exposed. There are a lot of exposures which we didn't anticipate. Hostages in amounts that we did not anticipate. People that had to deal with human remains in masses that we were not prepared to. And, you know, we prepared to deal with PTSD or acute stress reactions that result from combat. But human remains, it's totally different experience. And of course, it can cause a post-traumatic stress disorder, even if your life is not in danger. And the hostages is a very big part of the thing. And also, we have other phenomena that we need to deal with because the war is quite long, and there are people who came into Gaza, got outside, got into Gaza multiple times, which is also something which is very, very uncharacteristic of Israel. We are a very small nation, we are a powerful nation, and we usually think that we will win the war in 6 days. This is our prototypes, the 6 days war. And I think it's the longest war we have ever had, a lot of casualties, a lot of intricacies, and a lot of things that are very, very particular to this war. A few weeks ago, there was a report by the controller of Israel. They gave some statistics about the people that were exposed and about the mental health difficulties that they see. So they talked about 900,000 people suffering from stress, anxiety, PTSD symptoms, and about 3.5 million people which were exposed. Now, if you think about Israel, which has the population of 9.5 million people, we're talking about unprecedented exposure. You cannot relate that to anything, for instance, that happened in the United States after 9/11, because the magnitude of the exposure of the people and the stressors themselves and the timing of the stressor is unprecedented. And this is why we thought about constructing a center for PTSD. And fortunately enough, I was in position when the FIDF came, and together with ACA and Tel HaShomer, we built a very, very new program for a national PTSD center. Unfortunately, I wasn't there enough to see it completed, but the people that replaced me are doing an amazing job taking this program forward. And this is mainly thanks to the FIDF. I have to say, as a psychiatrist, I'm always like this stigmatized and doctors don't see me as doctor. Even when I was in Shiba and I did my health administration internship, then you would walk like in the cancer center or in the heart center, and they are amazing structures. And then you go to the psychiatric ward and it looks run down and the facilities are annoying. And I always tell them, two CEOs that go and do their cabbage or their central line in the heart center, they go later to their companies and they donate to the center. But nobody donates to the psychiatric wards. Nobody wants to say that their children are in the psychiatric ward, that they were injured. It's very stigmatizing. And the FIDF came through with that. And it was the first time that we got any money, I think, but especially this kind of money. And I think it's very, very important. And I think this is a change. As I told you, that I saw the change in our commanders, in our soldiers, in the stigma and in their ability to use mental health professionals in order to recuperate and gain resilience. I think that this is a very, very important thing as well. The ability to put funding and money in this part of the of medicine, which is usually quite neglected. And it's not neglected only in the IDF. By the way, the IDF did a better job than a lot of places in Israel. But in all over Israel, you see funding which is inappropriate and resources which are inadequate for the state of our patients. So I will stop now and let you ask me a bit things, and if not, I can still go on talking.
Dr. Laur, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that. The first question we'd like to ask you is this. My statistics are not up to date. These are statistics that come from late January. And at that time, 280,000 soldiers, not necessarily unique soldiers, some of them were soldiers that have been pulled out 2 or 3 times from the front line, infantry soldiers, to be observed, to be assessed. What they refer to in Israel as shrewd lechidut, the shrewd lechidut, it takes place at Ashkelon and other facilities. But of those 250,000 soldiers, they determined that the therapists of the Army, the mental health professionals of the IDF, took 2,800 out of them, out of their units, pulled them out, not because they were asking for help, but because the therapists detected something that they felt was crucial and significant, and they are going into therapy. I'm not talking an hour or 2 of therapy at the week in Ashkelon. I'm talking about serious therapy, which is an incredible thing, almost unheard of in the history of war, what you've done. That's one example. And this, I can just tell you that we've committed now about $25 million over the next 3 years, that every frontline battalion will get a week of that assessment, a week of that ability for the therapist to do the early detection. You have that. You have the therapy that we've spoken about. Right now, it's being done in Tel Aviv Yafo at the WeWorks building. Eventually, that national center in Netanya. And I think we can all relate to that. And we have a profound gratitude to you, to the team that you built, that you nurtured. Here's the question we have for you, that we who are not not only are we not medical professionals, but we're also not sensitive to military psychology and military therapy. You're developing something as well called a National Resiliency Center. I know because we're funding it, but you're the mastermind and the brainchild behind that. And the question that we have for you is, how do you teach, how do you train, how do you prepare someone for the most unpreparable experience, the brutality of war, the brutality of Hamas using human shields when they fight you, the brutality of what Hamas did to, that is something that is so inhuman, what they did to our people. How do you prepare anyone for anything like that? But yet you've developed this whole notion of a National Resiliency Center. If you can describe to us how it works, what you're trying to do, and what you're hoping to accomplish with that.
Okay, so first of all, it's a great question. I hope that I will give an adequate answer for that. And I have to tell you that the data is quite conflicting about how you build resilience. We know very, very practical things that we can do because the military is equipped about being able to build all sorts of abilities to soldiers in order to withstand the trial of war. They need to be in shape. They need to be cohesively act as a unit. They need to be prepared for the unprepared. And you know, war is always like this field of uncertainty, and we call it the fog of war. This kind of thing. And I think that people in the military also react differently to exposures of stress. For instance, we can see very particular differences between the people that were in October 7th during the war and people during the first part of the war, and people who were deployed very orderly with the preparation that a mental health officer gave them into a theater later on when the ground invasion started into Gaza. So, and you can see different responses in these two situations. But the question is, how do you build such a thing? And I think there is not one simple way to do that. First of all, a lot of things are unknown, so we need to do a lot of research, and this is part of what I'm doing here at the Center of the Study of Traumatic Stress, which is part of the uniformed academy in Bethesda. And we need, first of all, to select the right people, and this is a thing that demands a lot of clinical acuity and putting the right people in the right places. And we have seen incidents in which people who were not supposed to be where they were put that developed different kind of reactions. Then you build the team as a team, and you build leadership capabilities of the commanders. And something that we didn't anticipate that will happen until October 7, what happens when your commander dies, when all of your peers, some of them disappeared, some of them were kidnapped. How do you deal with that? So we train them beforehand in order to be able to deal with that. Either way, war is a very nasty business. You put your lives in danger, you put your body in danger. And I think that what we need to do for our soldiers is that to make sure that we are there for them. We prepare them to the best of our abilities. And I told you how we do that. And then we are there when some of them didn't manage to handle the pressure, the tension, and most of us would not have been able to handle the pressure. But even if we wouldn't be able to function optimally in this kind of condition, most of us would not be ill after that. We will, of course, be traumatized. We will be scarred. We will be changed, but we will not be unfunctional and will be ill. And I think there is another thing here, which is very, very important. And I think that it relates to the lower incidence of PTSD that we see in the Israeli army as opposed to other armies. For instance, the American armed forces. We have a very clear notion of what we are doing there. I think that most of our soldiers didn't doubt that the mission was appropriate, that they needed to do it, and they were doing it to save their lives, to save the nation's life. And this is very important. It's very, very different. For example, if you take an American soldier that is being deployed to Afghanistan, which is miles apart, it doesn't really connect to his home and to his peers and to his nation. And I think that the ability to envision rationally what I am doing there is a very important thing. Another thing which is very important, which is very unique to Israel, is that we are a very small country and our social ties are very, very close. So, for instance, even the most, combat soldiers, they come back home to their families like once every month, once every 3 weeks, which is also very important. You see your mother, and your mother believes in you. She's with you. And I think there was also a very, very amazing sense of solidarity in Israel, which was very apparent in the beginning of the war. But of course, there were also other things which were quite problematic. I think we talked about it. I personally think that us not returning the hostages is quite a damaging thing for the morale of the soldiers, for their ability to go on fighting, because Pidyon Shvuim is a very basic theme in Judaism, in my regard. I'm not as expert as you are in Judaism, and I'm secular, of course, but on the Judaism that I grew up with, the return of hostages was an imperative that we always stood by. And I think that this kind of thing is something that gets the people moving on an a bit uneasily, and especially because, we started with the first day of the war and the failure. It was not only a failure of the army. It was a failure of the army, and of course, but there was also a crack in the trust that the soldiers gave in us as a military body, and the trust in themselves, in their ability to complete the mission, and the trust in the other functions of the government that support them when they go to war. This is why I thought that being there for the soldiers was one of the most important things that I needed to do. This is why I decided to open a hotline, which we didn't do before that. This is why we enlisted about 800 mental health officers, and we sent them, and they were there, not in order to pathologize and to implement that myth of the mental health officer that will erase your trauma. No, but to rebuild the trust that we lost as a system, and that the soldiers really need to have in order to put themselves in risk when they go into battle. And we need to be there for them when they come back, either by selecting them correctly, by preparing them correctly, and when they fall, then to be there to pick them up.
So please correct me if there's any, I may be making some wrong assumptions in my question, and please correct them if they're wrong. In the Resilience Center, whatever that training will entail to train them for the impossible, for the brutality of war, I'm assuming that, number one, it's something you incorporate the officers in terms of the actual training. Number two is, I'm also assuming that it's a different form of early detection. In other words, you're looking at the impact, the response that individuals have long before. They could be right now a new soldier in training, or could be a soldier that's never seen any battle because he's put in an area that's not a dangerous area, but they go through this. I'm making all of these assumptions as to what happens at a resilience center. See, we have a notion, those of us who are not in the mental health world, we have a notion of what happens at a therapy center, what happens, in terms of working with the soldier, if the soldier has a wife, parents, etc. We have a notion of all of that. What we don't have a notion of is how does resiliency training work, and then what are the objectives or the goals of that resiliency training?
Okay, okay. Now I can understand better your question, and well, as I said, it is a difficult question, as it is a difficult answer. But I think there are formal things that we do, and there are a lot of informal things that we do. So the formal things would be like preparing for the mission, debriefing, going over their abilities to cope with stress, to cope with unknown things, to be able to identify their feelings, to be able to tolerate them, to be able to operate in such a difficult situation. For instance, you probably know that, but we developed something which is called in Hebrew Magen or Yahalom, which is a way that we can react to an acute stress reaction. What is an acute stress reaction? If you've seen Private Ryan, for instance, for people who haven't been to war, you are in a war situation, and then you are overwhelmed by the stress. Your cognitive abilities and your psychic abilities cannot stand that, and you dissociate. You cut yourself from reality. And then you're in the middle of theater, and then you have like this narrow vision seeing, and you stop being able to operate. So this is a very, very dangerous situation. Think of you in Gaza with your company, and you stop operating. So you're not only yourself in danger, but you put the others in danger as well, right? So what did commanders do before we invented the Yahalom? They would slap the soldier, tell him get out of it, and maybe he will, or maybe he will crack more than that. So we developed a very, very simple procedure in order to ground him, to bring him back to reality, to give him something to do, and to operate it automatically. And we have seen it work very, very efficiently. How did we see it work? First of all, in the resiliency part, commanders felt that they knew what to do when they were in battle and something like that arose. We saw them implementing these kind of strategies, and they didn't feel as anxious about it as they did before, and it opened much more their repertoire of behaviors that they can notice, understand, and react to, because you cannot anticipate everything that they're going to see over there. One of the most amazing thing that was done with it, and we did it with the American counterparts that are here, that they took it, they did some studies about it, and it was spread to all of NATO. It was called iCover in English. So you have something which is an Israeli invention that we invented in the Israeli army in order to deal with acute stress reaction. But it didn't only deal with acute stress reaction. It dealt also with the resilience part of it, right? Because when you know what you have to do when your team cracks, then you can prepare to that, and you feel much more confident, and you're able to expand your repertoire. So I think that this is, and then I told you about how we transferred it to the US, and from the US to the United, to all the NATO states. But this is an example of something which starts with a very practical thing that you teach the soldier, right? But you, in that sense, you enhance his cognitive ability and his emotional ability to deal with a lot of other different stressors. So it's not a one-on-one, because you cannot tell him, you're going to see children being butchered. You have to prepare for that. There is no way to prepare anybody for that. But you can prepare somebody to deal with overwhelming emotion, with behaviors of his peers that he cannot understand, how to contain himself and how to react to situations like that. And this takes a lot of practice. It sounds easy and it sounds like common sense, but you cannot imagine how not common sense it is in the real world, and how people cannot really do that. I hope I managed to.
No, thank you for sharing that. Just very briefly, the center that you are doing research at, the center that you're working with America, with NATO, or NATO countries, is that a government-sponsored program? Is that privately sponsored?
No. So it's the armed forces have a university which is called USUS, the University of the Uniformed Armed. It's a medical school, and it's based in Bethesda. And you probably know the hospital that is also of their, I forgot it now, but I will.
The hospital it's associated with
Walter Reed, yeah. So
Walter
Reed Hospital is the hospital associated with it. Inside it, there is a psychiatric department. So it's federally funded, and it's government owned. There is actually a bill that stated that this uniformed university will be instituted, and they are the ones who train all the medical doctors for the uniformed services in the US. So the psychiatric
I can tell
department.
you this, that we in America, having seen the terrible collateral damage to Vietnam vets, to Korean vets, to Persian Gulf II vets, it's just a tragedy. I mean, there's no words that can share how many American lives have been ruined, not on the battlefield, but as a consequence of not being treated properly and not being dealt with after the battlefield. And we in America have seen generations just lost, the human capital that has been lost, the spiritual, the intellectual, the human capital, the families that have been ruined as a function of this. And that's why we're incredibly, we're number one, we're grateful to you. But number two is we're incredibly proud of you that you're representing Israel, that I think it's fair to say is at the cutting edge, that it is doing things for the soldier that have never, ever been done by any military in the history of warfare, in the history of this world.
Yes, this is the center. I can't take credit for all the center's doing, of course. I'm very honored to be part of the center, and it's a very important center, and it consults the federal government on every type of disaster. Yes, I'm very fortunate to be here, and I'm very fortunate to have been in Israel during that period, so I will be able to teach people what we learned during that horrible phase of the war.
I'm going to ask you. It's unfair because as a scientist, you used to giving answers that you can show from data, etc. But taking a step back, and we're still in the middle of this, and we know that we're in the middle not only of the war, but in the middle of dealing with acute distress order, subacute PTSD, acute PTSD. We're dealing with depression. We're dealing with anxiety and a whole host of other challenges, mental health challenges. Having seen what you've seen, the number of mental health professionals that had no background in PTSD that are now being trained and being managed and mentored in this, having seen what you instituted and implemented with the early detection of soldiers, having seen the therapy for those who have it not to such a degree where it's not that acute that they have to be discharged, having seen those who have it so acute that they do have to be discharged. Are you fairly optimistic? That we will not be repeating what happened after the Yom Kippur War with our Israeli veterans, that we will not be repeating what happened after Vietnam with our American veterans, and that we will not be repeating what happened after Persian Gulf II with our American veterans? I know that's a loaded question, and it's not a scientific question, but I'd like to hear, because you're on the ground, I'd like to hear your sense of where you see it.
I will tell you how I see it. I think that the IDF is in a much better position than it has ever been. It's in part thanks to the works of the mental health officers that I commanded during the war, and that they are still operating today. But it's also a large part of the way that the commanders behaved and how they accepted us. And I think that the shift, and of course, to people like the FIDF that support such an endeavor. All these things are not banal. People think that talking about PTSD now is like this regular thing. No, it's not regular. We usually had to fight to be included in talks, in funding, in attention. And I think this is a thing that changed. And this is why I am optimistic with regard to the IDF. Why more than that, I'm optimistic with regard to the IDF? Because I think structurally, it's a very, very good organization. I was part of it, so maybe I'm biased about it. But I think that the commanders are amazing, the officers are amazing, and the way that that organization behaved the day after the failure was, was very. I wanted to say heartwarming, but I don't know if heartwarming is the right word. So maybe you can find something else. But if I'm talking about Israel, and I'm not very optimistic about Israel, because in Israel we have seen also a lot of people being exposed, and the severe underfunding of psychiatric services, of rehabilitation services is very, very critical. Also, there is a shift of people, of doctors, of psychiatrists, of other people leaving Israel. I don't know if we can talk about the economy in Israel, which is quite powerful, by the way, but I don't know for how long it will last. And of course, as the war continues, then budgetary constrictions will shift money from medicine and medical treatment to other parts. And I think this is where the American Jewry is a very, very important part in the rehabilitation of Israel as a whole. And I think that you have proved yourself immensely during all this war, and I don't think that we can, deal with it without your help, unfortunately. And we could have seen that not only the Jewry, but I think with the support of the United States as a whole, the support of your president and the support of other people in your administration. So if I will conclude my thing is that I'm optimistic about the IDF, and I think that what we did and what you are doing and now what you will do is amazing, and I'm very optimistic about it. For Israel as a whole, I am a lot less optimistic.
Dr. Laur, we can't thank you enough. To say thank you to you is cheap. It's just words. But what you've done and what you've created, you spent a life creating a team, a unit, an infrastructure that responded in a way that is unthinkable to an unthinkable tragedy. And because of you, from our perspective, because of you and your team, because of those that you partner with in the Ministry of Defense, we will not have a repeat of the Yom Kippur War. And we're very proud as American Jews to fund this, to support it. But you're the one on the front line. You spent your life creating a team like this, and they have just acted in a way that is superhuman, just superhuman. And in that sense, we want to show our gratitude. Other than saying thank you, we as the American Jewish community want to let you know how grateful, as you said, the generals get the glory, the admirals get the glory, but it's the mental health corps that's going to prevent the generation from it's going to prevent a tragic generation. And for that, the Jewish history will thank you.
It was a privilege to be there in that time and to be with these amazing people. And I don't think it's the work of one person. Even though I'm very flattered about what you said about me, I think it's the work of a lot of people, which did an amazing job in that regard. Unfortunately, we had to, which is kind of sad.
Yeah. Want to wish you, want to wish your family, and particularly want to wish the work that you're doing, the research you're doing, the teaching that you're doing should only have the greatest of success.